Hello Internet land, welcome to this live stream coming to you from CVP in Studley. My name's Dave Newton, I'm a professional filmmaker and photographer. Over here on my right we've got the beautiful Amanda. Those of you that have been up to CVP before may recognise her. You tend to sit somewhere by the front door, don't you?
I do.
You are that beautiful smiling face everyone sees when they come in.
To.
You try to be. There you go. So Amanda is going to be our model for the day while I'm talking to you about lighting. Now obviously this stream is all about light. I'll be telling you about a lot of the products that you can see around behind me, all of these light panel lights. Now, whatever you're doing as a photographer, filmmaker, DOP, gaffer, whatever it is, light is absolutely crucial. Without light, you've got nothing to film. You can't see anything, cameras can't see anything. So you have to get the light right. And in this stream, we're going to be talking about interview lighting. It's something I find a lot of people really struggle with. They know they need lighting, but they don't really know why or what they're going to do. And it can end up in a whole mess. And if you've got good lighting, if you think about where you're going to position your lights, you can take your kind of mediocre, average interview setup into something that really stands out. So we're going to look at probably two setups today. First one will be a very bright, light, corporate, kind of nice, punchy, poppy feeling kind of setup. And we'll use some of the features of particularly this light, the LitePanels Gemini to my right. And then we're going to look at something a little bit darker, a little bit more somber. Imagine you're telling a story that is perhaps a little bit sad. Maybe you've got someone telling a sad or a heart-wrenching or hard story. So we'll be looking at something a little bit darker. Now, the setup that we've got, I will talk you through a lot of the products that I have around as we get to using them. The setup that you can see from what we're calling my feature camera, I've got a C200, Canon C200 over to my left here. That'll be the one that will show you what our setup looks like. That's mounted on a Flowtech, a Vinton Flowtech 75 set of legs, and it's got an 85mm lens. So it's a lovely, from a stills point of view, it's a great head and shoulders portrait. I find it works really nicely for this kind of interview setup as well, because you've got nice fast aperture. We can use shallow depth of field, although I'll be showing you some other ways of creating separation as well. And it's a nice kind of perspective. It's very flattering for people. Obviously though, with the beautiful Amanda, we don't need to be too flattering because she just looks lovely as she is. So, given that this is live, given that it is a live stream, we will be taking questions. So if anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to jump in, type them in there. Please don't spam us. I will try and get through as many as I possibly can. They'll be popping up on a screen over to my side, and there's a couple of people behind camera that if I don't see them will be feeding me questions. Andrew's just kind of waved at me to say he's here. So he'll be feeding me questions as well. We've also got Alan in the US from LitePanels in the US. So any really techie product questions that you might have, feel free to jot those down as well. And he will be online answering some of those questions too. So please get involved. This is way more interesting if we have more of a dialogue than just a flat out monologue from me. And without further ado, I think we're going to get going. So we're going to start with this, this light and bright, very corporate, very friendly, very, I'm not going to say high key, but very bright and lively setup. So we've got Amanda, I've sat her in a chair. And if we just cut to the feature camera, I've not really got any lighting on her at the moment. There's a little bit coming from the Gemini over on the right-hand side. But you see it's all very dark. It's not very interesting. So we need to do something about that. So I'm going to start off just by bringing in one light. Now, you see as I bring this in, Amanda's now getting quite a bit brighter. Now, one of the things about lighting is where you position your lights. Okay? It's very important to think about not just popping a light on a stand and sticking it up and firing it, but exactly where you position it is crucial. So I started with this light a long way back. If I had this light a long way back and Amanda's a little bit dark, to get the correct exposure, I need to turn the brightness up. Now that's probably a little bit too harsh. But as I turn the brightness up, you see that we're now getting a lot of spill, apart from the fact Amanda's sort of kind of a bit blinded by a lot of light, but we're getting a lot of spill onto that background. Even though we've got this lovely dark curtain background here, we're spilling light over onto it. So we're not getting any of that kind of separation or creating any depth. So what I'm actually going to do now is bring the light back in closer. And by bringing the light in closer, if I don't change the brightness, obviously Amanda's just going to get brighter and brighter and brighter. but by bringing it in closer, I can take this brightness down, and I'm having a couple of effects. Apart from the fact that if I bring this down a little further, probably somewhere about here is quite nice. Because I've taken the brightness down, or because the light has got a lot closer to Amanda, I don't need as much brightness, so I can stop that spill of light firing through to the background. It's also, by bringing the light in closer, it's made it a lot softer. So we like soft light. The Gemini itself is a soft light. It's got that nice diffuse panel across the front of it. So you're getting some really lovely soft light anyway, so it's very flattering innately when you're filming people. And I've now got softer lighting, by which I mean the shadows are softer. So I've got the shadow falling down the side from Amanda's nose. That's a very soft edge that you can see there. It's not a very hard shadow. And as I say, I've managed to control that spill. Now, just by adjusting the angle, obviously if I fire this back towards the right a little bit, you can see that that black background has got a little bit brighter. Now, if I turn it back again, controlling the direction, we can see that the background's getting darker because I'm no longer firing the light at it. And instead of keeping the light directly at Amanda, I'm kind of shooting off the edge of it, so it's helping me to control the spill. Now obviously, I could do this by putting some barn doors on here, by adding accessories to control that spill, or maybe by putting a grid on here. But I just want to show you what can be achieved with the light on its own. So just simply changing the angle, I'm controlling that spill, I'm controlling where the light's going. Now if I bring the light round, this is something I find people don't do with lights at all. If I bring the light round, we can see the effect that it has on Amanda. So if I just brought the light into shot now, but if I just gradually wheel it back, see how that light changes as it comes around Amanda's face, how we start getting some modeling, some shape, some texture. Now, as I say, this is very much more of our light and bright corporate look. So I'm actually going to keep it slightly more front. I don't want to create too much of a side light. We're going to save that for a little later on when we get into our slightly more moody, contrasty setup. So I think here is quite nice. Now I've got, obviously as I say, the light in nice and close. I've got that soft light. It's quite flattering. As it is, one single light probably doesn't look too bad. It's quite a nice looking setup. But we're going to start adding some more in because I'd like to create a little bit of separation. Now this black background for me doesn't work. I find it a little bit flat. And so I need to help Amanda stand off that background a little bit more. I want to try and create some depth, and I'm going to do that by bringing in another light. Now I'm not going for a fill, I'm actually going to bring the background in now. So I'm going to wander over here, and I've got an Astra 1x1 6x bicolor. So if I pop this on, there we go. And once this comes in, which it will do once it warms up, there we go. Stabilize the power, and I'm just going to bring the light in a little bit. There we go. And now we can see, if I can get my feature camera back so I can see what that looks like. There we go. So if I take this down, you can see just by turning this on a little bit, I create that hair light. And now Amanda's got a little bit of separation. She's got a bit more depth to her. There feels like it's a little bit more 3D. And because this is bicolor, I can actually mess around with the color temperature as well. So the camera is currently set to 5,600 Kelvin. The main light is set to 5,600 Kelvin as well. But I can change this. This is now very much warmer, so we're much more towards the tungsten end of the spectrum. Or I could create a cooler look, try and match it up. That's probably around 5,600 Kelvin, about there. So that's matched up with the Gemini. Or I can go a little bit bluer still. There we go. And if I take this up, you see it's probably a bit over. I'm just going to dial it back somewhere about there. Now, it's a very personal choice as to what you're looking for. Do you want it to feel warmer or cooler? Personally, I think it looks nicer a little bit warmer, particularly with Amanda's blonde hair. I think just bringing in a bit of that tungsten light, bringing in some of that warmth, really helps create some more interesting lighting. So I'm going to dial in a bit more tungsten here, make it a little bit warmer. There's a little bit of a hot spot just on the top corner of her head, so I'm just going to take the intensity down a little bit. And I think something around there looks quite nice. So we've now gone from one light to two lights. Now, because I've positioned the main light, the Gemini here, in such a way that I'm not getting too much shadow falling across the face, I don't think that I really need to bring in too much of a fill light, but I'm going to turn one on and just show you what it looks like so you can see what we can do. So I'm going to come over back across here, and I've now got an Astra 1x1 soft, and I'm just going to bring this in, let it warm up, and I can just start bringing this up. Now the shadows, as I say, weren't too hard, they weren't too unflattering, but now if I just turn this off and turn it back on again, you see we've just created slightly softer, slightly more balanced light. Now if you're looking for something corporate, you want your corporate clients to look good, this is probably a pretty good way of going about it. So we've got 3 lights in here, the Gemini, the Astra 6X bicolor, and the Astra 1x1 soft, and we've created what is, in essence, a very clean, very flattering, very nice looking lighting setup. But it's still lacking something. There's still something missing for me. Now, if you've got a corporate client, and maybe they've got corporate colors, or maybe you just want to give them something a little bit pizzazz, a little bit of pop, something that really stands out, we can add a bit of color. Now, we've got a black background. Black is not usually the best background to be taking a color. Ideally, a nice mid-tone gray would be beautiful. It takes color wonderfully, but you'll be surprised about what we're going to achieve. So what you can possibly see in this wide shot, if I kind of point somewhere down here-ish, there it is, past Amanda in the background, is we've got another Gemini down on the floor, and it is just lying flat on the floor, pointing up. I'm using one of the features of the Gemini, which is the ability to have wireless DMX control. I've got a wireless DMX box over here, which you guys can see here. And this is going to give me control of that light. So I've got control of the intensity, I've got control of the hue, and I've got control of the saturation. So I'm just going to turn the master up, and you see I've set it to blue at the moment. So if we just cut to the feature camera and see what that looks like. If I take this down, so I just A/B swap it, so it's off and on. You see how we've gone from this black background, which is not too bad, but now we've just got a lovely, interesting blue background. But maybe we've got a client who likes red. So I'm going to use the feature of the Gemini to be able to create any color I want. And now we've got a nice red background. Yeah, and we can control the saturation, we can control the intensity of that depending on exactly the look you're going for. So with these lights, you've got a lot of control. I'm going to put it back to the blue because Amanda, when I spoke to her earlier on, quite liked the blue, didn't you, Amanda?
I did.
You were keen on the blue. And the blue really picks up your eyes nicely as well, so I think it's quite a flattering choice. So that was somewhere around there. There we go. Let's take the intensity down a little bit. So if you're looking to create some kind of very corporate result, you've now got a setup that can do it, and it really wasn't that complex. It's really not that difficult to set up. Now, if you're on the Geminis, you've got the ability to dial in presets as well. So you could have a preset for doing this kind of setup. Let's say you have 2 Geminis, and if you have a look on the CVP page, you'll see we've created a few lighting setup kits, one of which has 2 Gemini units in it. You could preset that blue, if that was a blue that you particularly like using, or you could preset the Kelvin value and the intensity for this main light here, and you could just recall them. They're on A/B presets. All you do is push a button and it will come back immediately every time. So if you have to do repeatable setups, that's a really nice feature of the Geminis that can really help speed up your setting up. So that is our first setup, our kind of corporate light and bright setup. Do we have any questions from the audience at the moment?
We have one, yeah. Question says, why do you like the Astra Soft and the Gemini for interviews?
Why do I like the Astra Soft and the Gemini for interviews? Okay, good question. For me, I like soft lighting, personally. I'm a fan of soft lighting. If you're filming people, I think it's nice to be as flattering as possible to them. Now, we are, in a minute, going to move on and do something a little bit harder, but personally, I like a soft light. I think it makes people, people obviously look better. People prefer to see themselves in a soft light because it doesn't show up any wrinkles or any flaws. I can't say it puts makeup artists out of business, but it certainly makes it a little bit easier. And you can make a soft light hard simply by moving it further away. Equally, you can make a hard light soft by adding accessories, but I like to keep things as simple as possible. So a soft light for me I find far more useful than having a collection of hard lights. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, moving on. We're now going to change this setup a little bit, and we're going to have a little look at a setup that is, as I said before, a bit harder. Maybe it's a bit of a harder hitting piece, or maybe you're thinking about a sad story you're trying to tell. You need to create a bit more drama. So obviously lighting and camera setup helps create the drama. It's not just the story, but it's the way that you set up your camera and it's the way that you set up your lighting that really helps convey that really draws the viewer in and gives them the emotion of that story. So I'm just going to drop some of these lights down, and we're going to start once more with one single light, and I'm going to reframe the camera, and we're gradually going to build the next scenario. So the soft has come off, and I'm just going to pull it back out of the way. And we've got the 6X turned off, and I'm pulling that back out of the way. And with the wireless DMX, I'm just going to take the backlight down. And so we are back to what is in essence our single light setup. Now, I need to reframe because at the moment I've got a very classic interview setup. I've given Amanda space to look into, so she could be talking to me here. Wouldn't you, Amanda? You'd be chatting to me here? Absolutely, it'd be great. But if I'm telling a sad story, maybe I don't want to frame Amanda off on that side. So instead, I'm just going to frame her a little bit further over this way. So I'm actually going to butt her up against that frame so that she's looking slightly more out of frame. And Amanda, I'm just going to get you to turn your chair a little bit more for me, please. So just favour it round towards me. So I've got a little bit more of an angle. There we go. And that's really, well, it is actually quite nice. But we've still got the light very square on to Amanda, so we don't have any shape or modelling. Now, I showed you before just moving the light around as we run the light across Amanda effectively. I'm just spinning this round, trying to avoid running over her lovely black boots. There we go. You see as I bring this round, obviously I showed you this bit before, but now I'm going to take it back this way, and we're going to create, as I saw somebody asked on the question, Rembrandt lighting. So, as I bring this across here, that is getting a bit closer to Rembrandt. We've got that shadow now. Someone I saw, as I said, popped up with the Rembrandt triangle. And what is Rembrandt lighting? I'm going to finesse this in a moment. But to answer the question, for those of you that don't know what Rembrandt is, obviously Rembrandt, one of the old masters, and his use of light informs a lot of filmmaking, a lot of photography, as many of the old masters do. And when we're talking about the Rembrandt triangle, we're trying to create a triangle of light on the unlit side. So the reason Rembrandt did his lighting like that was because that was the light he had available. He had small windows with actually quite hard light coming in at a low angle. And that was the light that he painted in. So that's what it looks like. And it was, whether it was by design or by fortuitous happenstance, that's for the art historians to decide. But it is a very interesting, very flattering light that people like to use a lot, both in video and still. So that's what we're going to sort of create now. So I've moved the light further round. I want to harden it up a little bit, just a little, so I'm going to move it slightly further away. And what I want you to see now is how important the height is. So Amanda, can I just get you to pull that hair back off the right-hand side of your face, please? So that we've got a little bit more chance of seeing that Rembrandt light. There we go. So you see that triangle now coming down below the eye, and that's obviously just the light spilling past the nose. But the elevation of the light is also very important. Now we want to try and make sure that we've got some light in a subject's eyes. If you don't have light in the subject's eyes, then they can seem very dead. And that's not something you really want to do. So if I bring this up, you see how that shadow now has dropped a lot lower, but also there's no light into Amanda's eyes at all. So the light in itself, we've still got the Rembrandt triangle, so you might still argue, oh, we've got nice Rembrandt lighting. But actually, even if I turn that intensity up to account for the fact that I've taken it further away, there's nothing in the eyes. There's no depth, there's no soul, there's nothing that you can really connect to. So now, as I bring this back down, obviously I've brought it back down and it's got a bit brighter, but you see how there's now a catch light in Amanda's eyes. Now that's arguably getting on to be a bit too low. We've still got a bit of the Rembrandt triangle, but personally I'd like to see the base of that triangle come a little bit lower down so that it's more in line with the base of the nose. So I'm just going to come up slightly, which is going to help extend that triangle. There we go. We've still got the light in Amanda's eyes, and I'm just going to take that down just to try and get rid of the highlight on the left-hand side of Amanda's face. Now, I said before that I'm a photographer and filmmaker. I came from a photography background, so when I start thinking about lighting, I often think about broad lighting and I think about short lighting. And it depends who you're lighting as to what you want to do, but my preference, particularly for ladies, is always to try and short light them. So you'll notice that I'm actually filming the right-hand side of Amanda, which is the unlit side. So I'm filming into the shaded side. And that's short lighting, which Amanda doesn't need the help because she's beautifully similar anyway. But if you're filming a lady who is of a slightly fuller facial figure, then you want to try and short light them, which is going to help trim them off a little bit. So by positioning the light on, in this case, camera right as you're looking at it, and then shooting to Amanda's right-hand side, so shooting to the unlit shaded side, I'm creating short lighting as opposed to having the light on the other side, which is going to kind of stretch out the face. And it's something you need to do when you're working with models or anyone that you're filming. You should actually spend a little bit of time just looking at their face, looking at the features of their face. What do you want to bring out? What do you want to try and hide away? What do you want to highlight? What do you maybe need to try and avoid? And you're going to do that by having a good chat with them. And it's a real trick that lighting cameramen, that gaffers, that people that are thinking about light will do. They'll just come in and they'll have a conversation and they'll be looking at their subject the whole time, trying to figure out how they're going to light them. So Amanda and I had a chat earlier on and she was completely unaware of it, weren't you, Amanda? I was studying your face, trying to figure out exactly where I was going to position light to try and make you look your absolute best. So we've got our main light in. If we just cut back to the feature light, I'll see what that looks like. I think that's looking quite nice. And already, you see we've got this, I'm just going to favour that angle a little bit more. We've already got this slightly more somber feeling mood. But again, as we had before, we're still lacking any of that depth. We're still lacking any kind of three-dimensionality. So once more, I'm going to bring in, just so that we can see, I'm going to bring in the fill light. Personally, I'm not sure I want too much fill light in this. I'm just going to bring this up just a touch. We're roughly matched. Now you see, the problem that we start facing when we bring in this fill light is I need to position it round a little bit, otherwise I'm going to end up creating too much of a shadow from Amanda's hair. And as I do that, you see that that whole Rembrandt triangle is gone, and we've got back to pretty much where we were before, which was that corporate setting, but just offset with a slightly kooky angle. So it doesn't really work so well, which is why, in this instance, I try and keep it a bit harder. I'd be taking this right down or keeping it very, very subtle as a very soft fill. So maybe about there. It helps take off just a little bit of that shadow, particularly if you look down on the right-hand side of Amanda's cheek and under the jawline. Just having a little bit of light there without going too far still gives us that Rembrandt feel, but stops those shadow areas feeling too dark. They've got some value in there, there's some light in there. I'm now going to move back round to the background, and we're once more going to bring this hair or separation light in. So I'm going to keep it nice and warm again, but I don't want too much. I'm also going to drop the angle a little bit because I don't want it to be too high up. Now, one thing you could do, if you're looking to create depth, as I said before, we can use colour. so I can keep this nice and warm. Warm, I think, maybe, if we're trying to tell a dark, somber, hard story, I don't think that you want to go too warm. So we could now start playing with color temperature. So by bringing this further round to the cool side, if we were to adjust the white balance on the camera as well, one of the benefits of say, the Gemini is that we can pick any tungsten to daylight setting from 6,000 Kelvin all the way down. We could then create a lighting differential. And that's one of the nice things when you're working with a couple of lights that are bicolor. You've got the ability to create that kind of lighting mood. Now, we've got this set up, as you saw from the feature setup there. We've got this nice light setup. It's kind of somber, it's kind of dark and moody and maybe a little bit hard. I think there is one other thing that I want to show you in this, also about creating depth. Now, before we used color to create depth. This time, I'm going to just actually bring this hairlight in. If we had, let's say we were doing a setup somewhere in an environment, not a studio like this, but let's say you're in a building, you're in a room somewhere, and there is stuff in the background. You can use a light to create some kind of depth. It can be a light that's already in there, and then you could mimic it. So if I can just see the feature camera again, there we go. Now we don't have a huge amount of space here, so I can't keep this in or out of depth of field too much. But actually, if you're looking to create something a little interesting, I'm just going to make that a bit warmer, maybe a little bit brighter. This in itself, just having that light slightly in frame, helps create a little bit of depth and separation. Now, it is a personal choice. Lighting is entirely personal. Some people will love this and think, yeah, that's a really great use, and I quite like the idea of having the light in frame. Alternatively, if you think you've just got a feature light, maybe there is a light on a lampstand or something like that, you could put that in the background and then mimic the light with one of your other light setups. So, what have we looked at in this setup? This one has been, as I said, that very much darker, very much more somber setting. I've off-centered the subject. I've off-centered Amanda, so she's looking more against that outside edge of the frame. I've created a darker mood, a slightly more somber mood, something that creates or brings in a little bit of the feeling of the story that maybe we're trying to tell. We've not asked Amanda to cry. You're not going to cry, are you, Amanda? No, lovely, okay, good. But just simply with the lighting, with the positioning of the lighting, and it really hasn't been complex, we've created that nice darker mood. Now, I noticed a question come up a few minutes ago. How about a little bounce board for fill? Absolutely. Obviously, I've got quite a lot of lighting here. I've got the ability to use a lot of lighting, and I can create fill with, in this case, an Astra 1x1 soft. But what you'll notice when you have a look on the kits, yes, you could use a bounce board, you could use a Elastilite reflector, just something white that is going to create a little bit of a kick to push some light back in. And in fact, I'm just going to have a look over here. There's something that might work if it has a white background. It doesn't have a white background, but this is white. So I've just wandered into frame and grabbed a little bit of white card. There you go. You see this little bit of white card. So I'm going to turn this light, which was our fill light, off. Now this little bit of white card is not that big. You see it's quite small. And I'm probably going to have to get quite close. But even here, just this very little bit of white card. I don't know if you can see that. It's just showing ever so softly. It's just lifting that shadow. So without going to having another light, a little bit of, in this case, tiny white card. You imagine this was something slightly bigger. There you go. You see it just sort of, as I move it around, you can just see the light appear and disappear on Amanda's face. You can just use anything. A shower curtain, a white bed sheet. In fact, I'll tell you what I can use. I've got a DOP Choice snap bag on the wide camera. There we go. DOP Choice snap bag, which will fit on the Gemini. So if you wanted a soft light to be even softer, you can make it into a larger light source. Obviously, we talk about soft light, and that is the size of the light source relative to the subject. I could even use this. Just this white front should push a bit of light back. There you go. So we're now using a diffuser as a reflector. Slightly unconventional. But it works. Anything that you've got that can push just a little bit of light back in is going to give you that lift and help you just soften shadows if that's what you're trying to do, or lift the shadow values so that they're not too deep and dark and black. Okay, how are we getting on for questions? I've seen that there's been a few coming through.
Yes, another question we have is, someone has spotted the Fresnel light that you've got behind the Gemini.
Yes.
How would you use that in a...
The Fresnel light, there we go. Okay, so somebody with eagle eyes picked this up in the background, so I'm just going to bring this through so that you can see it a little more clearly. So this is one of the LitePanels solar units. This is the Solar 4. Would I use this in an interview? Well, I certainly wouldn't be using this as a key light in an interview. It really is probably a bit too hard. However, where I've got that Astra 6X in the background, I could very easily replace that with this Fresnel light. In fact, so that you know what that looks like, I'm just going to unplug this, run it over there, and we'll whip this one off. Find a plug socket that we can use. That one there will do. Lovely. Now, this Fresnel, this Solar 4, is focusable. So we've got a dimmer. Let me come slightly out of the way here. I'll bring it up a little bit. And we've got barn doors built in, so I can essentially make sure that I'm not creating too much spill. But I can focus that light as well. So you see, this is our intensity. You can see it's now fully focused into a tight spot, which is going to create way too much of a hot spot on Amanda's head. But if I now focus this out, you see how that, as I got to a point, it started to spread down just from the back of the head, down the back of the shoulder to create that cut line. And I'm just going to take the intensity down. And there we go. We've now got that separation light, but we're using a Fresnel spotlight rather than using the Astra 6X that we had before. Now, it's kind of a pick and choose between them. The advantage of the Astra 6X, obviously, is that it's bicolor, so you can create that color separation if you want, whereas the Solar is a single color, it's not a bicolor. So you don't have that ability, but you've got that focusing capability, which maybe gives you, depending on how you want to light, a different creative option. Any other questions coming in?
I can't see, but I think someone asked about how the Gemini creates all the different colours.
How does it create all the different colours? Okay, yes. So, the Gemini, one of the great things about the Gemini is that it's incredibly brilliant in its ability to create tungsten and daylight. So its TLCI rating, as I said earlier on, those of you in broadcast were very interested in this, its TLCI rating is incredibly high. It's 99 in tungsten and 97 in daylight. But because of the way that LitePanels create their light, you've got also the ability to create any other color. Now, I showed you blue and red earlier on, and it's done essentially with a collection of RGB LEDs. So you can dial up the intensity between the red, green and blue LEDs and therefore create any of those colors that you want. And the advantage you've got is the way that LitePanels generate that light, you can create a consistent color at any intensity. So it doesn't vary as you start dimming. And that's true not just for all of the colors, but it's also true for the tungsten and the daylight. So whatever, let's say we're in a 5,600 Kelvin setting. As you start dimming the light, there is essentially no appreciable color shift in your Kelvin value because of how tightly controlled the lighting is and the way that LitePanels generate that light with their LED diodes. So yes, it's a combination of RGB diodes that gives you access to all of those lights, and as I said, it's very consistent across any brightness range. And one of the other things that this gives you, those of you that are gaffers that are used to using gels, if you want to use gels, or you're used to using gels, you're used to gelling up your lights to match, there is a complete gel library built into the Geminis as well. And the menu system is really simple. You've got 3 dials, you go into the menu, and you can pick from a massive library collection of Roscoe and Lee gels, and you can then decide whether you're trying to match this light to a light that's gelled with a Lee gel on a daylight light, or a Lee gel on a tungsten light, because it will obviously have a very different effect. And that's all built in, and it's just a couple of button presses to get to it. So hopefully that answered your question about how they do the colours and how they do the lighting, but also give you a little bit more about some of the other features available. Now, any other questions? Is this actually live? Well, if you wanted to know if this is actually live, I've just answered your question live. So yes, it's actually live. Apparently that's an unhealthy life decision. Okay, any other questions that have come through that I've skipped? Andrew?
Another question, yeah. How does the position of the light fixture affect the background look?
Position of the light fixture affect the background look? What, in terms of where I position the lighting?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, if I move the light, how does it affect it? It's kind of about how far it is more than its position. Obviously, the position is kind of important, because if I turned this light that we've got here, if you look at the feature camera, if I turn it across to the right-hand side, I get more spill across to the background. Obviously, Amanda's just gone dark, but you see that that background is no longer black. So I've created spill, and as I explained earlier on, I could remove that by conversely bringing the lighting closer to Amanda, and therefore turning the intensity or turning the brightness down. But it's also about, as I say, how near or far you are, not just the positioning. So you've got the spill created by the light maybe being too far away and you need to get it in closer, but also about whether you're going to angle it towards or whether you're going to angle it away from the background. So we could, as I said earlier on, take some barn doors and help control some of the spill off here. But for me, actually, certainly in this situation, I think that just some careful positioning of the light, low enough to get the catch light, far enough over to create the Rembrandt lighting that we were looking for before, but not shooting off the middle of the light, shooting off the edge of the light, is going to give us that controlled spill over onto the background. How's that? All good? There we go. Apparently we are live. We've been accepted as being live. Thank you. I'm very glad you're happy that we're live. Okay, no other questions yet? Okay, how are we doing for time? We're probably running on for time now. So I think if nobody has any other questions, at this point I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully you found it interesting. Obviously this is going to be available online in perpetuity, so you can go and have a look back at the 2 lighting setups that we created. We started off, to give you a recap, with that light and bright creative setup for corporate, using some colours in the background to create some depth, to create some interest. That gave us that poppy feel. Then we moved on to the darker, more somber feeling, with very much the same lighting setup, and just by a slight tweak of the camera position. Hopefully, that's giving you some ideas. It's showing you a little bit about what some of these lights are capable of, and maybe a few ways of going to think about your own lighting and taking your interviews from looking okay to hopefully looking a little bit better. I'm going to say thank you very much to Amanda. Thank you. She's been wonderful. She sat there absolutely silently. She smiled when I made bad jokes. She's looked wonderful, and she's done it without getting hot and sweaty and bothered, haven't you, Amanda? You absolutely have. You have. Okay, so those of you that come into CVP, remember to come in and say hi to Amanda next time you're here. As I said, you can't get past her. She'll be just in front of the door. So have I got one other? Is there another question coming in? Have I just been highlighted? I've just been highlighted another question. Okay, would I ever use a separate small light for an eye light if my key light is not giving a catch? And that's a good question, and I'm going to hold off the end to answer that. Some people would say yes. Personally, I'd try and get my key light into position to create that catch light. The trouble is, if you start bringing in another light, maybe you'd use, well, actually the light that we've got, the on-camera light that we've got for this camera here, which hopefully they may cut to in a moment. There we go, so this is my camera. There is an on-camera light for that to light me, and that is the LitePanels brick, otherwise known as the holy hand grenade. That's a lovely way of giving a catch light. The trouble is, if you start bringing that light in, you're adding more lights, your setup's getting more and more complex. But also, it's not just giving a catch light, it's always going to lift the values on the subject's face. So you've created beautiful lighting with whatever setup you've done, in this case the Gemini and the Astra, and then you've gone and added some other light to it and changed it just because you wanted a catch light. Personally, I'd contest that you're better off just trying to get a catch light with the positioning of your key light. Now obviously if that's not possible, if you obviously you want a catch light and you absolutely can't get your key light somewhere to give you a catch light, then yeah, I'd start thinking about bringing in something else. But for me, that would always be a last resort. I know there are other lighting guys, gaffers, who would disagree, but that's one of the great things about lighting and camera work and the whole subjective nature of it. There's a lot of personal choice in there. So on that, unless there are any more questions that I get thrown, you've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No more questions. Brilliant. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you found it interesting. Please go and take a look at some of the kits that we've put together on the CVP website. Once again, thank you very much to Amanda. Thank you to all the guys around the back. Thank you to you for watching. I look forward to seeing you at future live streams that we'll be doing. There will be more on LitePanels coming live from CVP Studley in the not too distant future, so keep your eyes open for them. Thanks very much, guys. See you again soon.